Welcome. I hope you are having a wonderful night, dear viewer. Tonight, I will be telling some terrifyingly scary stories. Make sure to leave your feedback on the comments, so I can make this the best experience for you. And if you have any stories you would like me to tell, you can send them through the link in the description. Let's begin. Story 1. I found myself at a crossroads in my military career. As a sergeant in the U.S. Army, I had made the decision to exit from the military and return home to Austin, Texas. However, fate had other plans for me. In 2003, President Bush ordered more troops into Iraq. And just as I thought I was done with the Army, I was summoned to my local National Guard unit at Camp Mabry. The news that awaited me was unexpected and unsettling. I was being recalled to the Army, and the unit was already scheduled to deploy to Iraq. However, there was a glimmer of hope in the midst of this chaotic turn of events. Although I was not yet officially part of their unit, the commander offered me a waiver to deploy with a government contractor, Halliburton, in Houston. The allure of better financial prospects convinced me to accept the offer, and so my journey took a different path. Soon after arriving in Kuwait at Camp Doha, I found myself working with the operations team overseeing logistics affairs. Our primary responsibility was to supervise the daily convoy of supplies between Kuwait and Baghdad. This particular route was notorious for its dangers. Incidents, small arms, skirmishes, and frequent breakdowns of both Army and civilian vehicles. Given my previous experience as a saw gunner in the 1st Infantry Division during my active duty, and the fact that I was technically still in the Guard, I often found myself manning a mounted weapon as part of the mostly civilian convoys. It was during these perilous journeys that we encountered the peculiar region known as Camp Babylon, located south of Baghdad, occupied by French troops and designated an archaeological site due to the remnants of what was believed to be the famous Tower of Babel. Camp Babylon carried an eerie atmosphere. On 2 separate occasions, I experienced strange incidents in this vicinity that left a lasting impression on me. The first incident, while seemingly harmless, set the stage for what was to come. It occurred one afternoon as we passed through Camp Babylon, and our convoy suddenly came under small arms fire. Following the standard operating procedure, we halted the convoy and returned fire. This precautionary measure was meant to deter potential attackers from luring us into the trap. As the engineers scoured the road for explosives, our gaze was drawn to the ruins surrounding Camp Babylon. To our surprise, these ruins seemed to be alive with mysterious shadow figures moving about. These elusive entities caught our attention on multiple occasions, only to vanish instantly. I remember one contractor lying beside me with his weapon, commenting on the oddity of fighting the supernatural while in the shadows of Babel. He was a 32nd degree Mason with a keen interest in the arcane aspects of Babylon. Although I didn't share his fascination at the time, I couldn't deny the presence of these shadowy and oddly diminutive figures darting amidst the ancient structures. Once the road was cleared of potential threats, we resumed our journey to Baghdad. The second incident unfolded approximately a month later as the weather turned colder during our return from Baghdad to Camp Doha in Kuwait. Our convoy faced a setback when one of the vehicles broke down right at Camp Babylon. As the Army mechanics attended to the repair, the rest of us assumed defensive positions in the vicinity. Little did we know that we were about to witness something truly extraordinary. It began with the appearance of a strange light flickering in the desert. Mistakenly assuming it was someone carrying a flashlight, we utilized our night vision goggles to investigate. To our astonishment, the source of the light turned out to be a self-contained glowing ball, slowly advancing towards a set of ruins. Curiosity got the better of us, and a few of us ventured forward, away from the convoy, to explore further. However, what we encountered was far from what we expected. As we approached the ruins, a sound reverberated through the air, etching itself into my memory forever. It was a mournful wail. a haunting mixture of agony and loneliness that emanated from one of the dilapidated structures or foundations nearby. We stood there in the cold and darkness, listening intently, pondering the nature of the eerie sound. Equipped with our night vision goggles, we shone our flashlights upon the ruins, causing a beam of light to illuminate the area. Yet, despite our thorough search, we found no trace of the wailing figure or the glowing ball of light. Sensing that it was time to return to our convoy, we prepared to leave. As I slung my saw over my shoulder, I noticed that my contractor partner was frozen in a state of horror, his gaze fixated upon the ruins. Startled, I shook him out of his trance, and he quickly joined the rest of us as we left the area. Back at the camp, in the safety of daylight, the following morning, I found myself discussing the encounter at Camp Babylon with my comrades before our daily operations briefing. It was then that I recalled the terrified expression on the face of my contractor partner and decided to inquire about it. Clearly traumatized, he struggled to recount what had happened. He described seeing a tall, black figure standing beside the ruins as we were leaving our position on the sandy hill. This figure observed us as we searched for the source of the wails and the glowing light. Overwhelmed with an intense wave of despair, he believed his life was in immediate danger. He had no recollection of leaving the area. His next memory was being inside the Humvee, en route back to Kuwait. Today, I write non-fiction books about haunted locations for LOL and publishing, and have explored countless reputedly haunted places. However, the encounter at Camp Babylon remains etched in my mind, a constant reminder of the unexplained. Interestingly, when I shared my story with some of our Pakistani employees at Camp Doha and Camp Aref Jan, they too were horrified by the events. One of them, a translator we called Artie, claimed that we had encountered a D-Jinn, or a damned spirit, and considered us fortunate to have survived the encounter. I couldn't help but agree. In conclusion, my time spent at Camp Babylon during my deployment in Iraq introduced me to the supernatural and unexplained. The remnants of the Tower of Babel cast a haunting presence over the area, revealing shadows that danced and wails that pierced the silence. To this day, the memory of those inexplicable incidents serves as a constant reminder of the mystical forces that reside within our world, hidden in the most unexpected of places. Story 2. I'm a lifeguard at a water park in Las Vegas. We always brag about how, unlike our competition, we have had 0 casualties. Stuff always happens, like tubes appearing in the pool after we just took them all out and stacked them, chairs moving around after we just sorted them, wet footsteps on concrete when no one was wet, etc. We joke that we don't get paid enough to fight demons. It was just a joke to us, but not to our supervisors or managers. They always made excuses. It was always the wind, or I moved it, or they're my prints. They always got angry at us and said that someone could overhear us and complain. They even went as far as to threaten us with a defamation lawsuit if we talked about it on social media. Weird, right? If the park wasn't haunted, why would they care so much about us talking about it? I never cared because I believed my supervisors and managers. Maybe they did move the chairs. Maybe they dipped their feet in the pool and walked away. That was until last month. It was 10 p.m. and we had just finished cleaning the park. I had to stay later because I was getting a ride from my supervisor, Ryan. We were the few people left in the park, so we were doing a final walkthrough just to make sure everything was clean. We only had a flashlight and a few light posts illuminating our path around the park. We were walking by some slides when I heard someone, a woman, say, "Hello." I looked at Ryan, who didn't seem to hear it. Then we heard her again, "Hello." I freaked out, and Ryan, again, didn't seem to hear it. "Did you not hear that?" I said to Ryan. He shrugged and continued walking. I stopped and said I didn't want to do the walkthrough with him. He rolled his eyes and said, "If I didn't, I'm refusing to work," which isn't a good thing to say to your supervisor. He told me I was probably just hearing things. I got a hold of myself and continued walking. We started getting to the back of the park where the light posts were dimmer. and it was much quieter since we were further from the running water in the slides. Ryan and I started talking about school and college and what we were going to do when the season ends when I heard it again, but it sounded closer this time. "Hello? Anyone there?" She sounded very confused and tired. I jumped, and again, Ryan did not care at all. I was so freaked out, I started feeling nauseous. I wanted to go home, but Ryan was my ride home. So I had to stay. What happened next haunts me. After we heard the voice, we heard what sounded like someone climbing out of the lazy river soaking wet. No one else is here. If they were, they would be in the office. No one should be swimming. Ryan was angry. He thought a lifeguard snuck into the river. He turned around and started yelling. "What the fuck? Go home! This isn't fun!" He froze. I said a quick prayer and turned around. There was a lady, soaking wet, wearing a park shirt with our logo on it. But the logo looked very 2000s. I know what our shirts look like. I stand in the shop all the time. I have never seen that shirt. She was hunched over, and her hair covered her face. She spoke. "Hello, can you help me?" Ryan grabbed my arm, and we bolted to the office. Lifeguards weren't allowed inside the office, ever. It's a whole thing, but he let me come inside. He pulled one of the managers into the supply room and shut the door. Another supervisor started asking me if I was okay. I was breathing heavily and couldn't speak, but I nodded yes. Ryan and the manager came out of the room, and Ryan grabbed his stuff and said, "Let's go." We got in his car, and he said we needed to stop by the gas station first. When we pulled in, he told me to type my address into his phone while he pumped gas. When he got in the car, I broke the silence. What the fuck was that? What happened? He turned the car on and started driving. I can't tell anyone. It's like a park secret, but I'll tell you if you swear you won't tell anyone. I swore. Back in 2002, before this location of the park was built, there was a park on the Strip. It was the only water park in Vegas. We only had one casualty, and it was a lady who came in with her family. She got drunk and went into the lazy river, where she sank to the bottom. And because there were so many tubes, the lifeguards didn't see her, and she drowned. That's why we have so many lifeguards for the river and why our tubes are see-through. So was that her? Yeah. Why is she here? I don't know. She's probably confused. She's always asking for help. So you did hear her? Yeah. But everyone does when you're in the park late at night. It's a whole different story if you see her. What happens if you see her? Nothing, but it's scary. The car ride was silent the rest of the way. I still work at the park, but Ryan talked to the managers and convinced them to let me work only morning shifts. Ryan quit recently due to college. I only told 2 coworkers, but only because they have had experiences themselves. Story 3. One night, a few years ago, I heard the sound of someone breaking into my house. It was around midnight when this happened, and up to this point, I don't think I had more than 20 minutes of sleep. But as soon as I heard the window being broken, I was wide awake and looking for my phone to call the police. My heart jumped into my throat when I realized that I left downstairs charging in the kitchen. At the bottom of the steps, I saw the silhouette of a man sitting at my kitchen table. It was dark, so I could not see him, but the stink coming off the man was enough to curl my nose hairs. It was obvious even without the lights on that he was homeless. I was about to throw him out, but as soon as I turned on the lights, I couldn't help but to feel bad for the stranger. He was sickly skinny, dirty, with long, stringy hair that grew in patches and a matching beard. The way he sat there motionless with tears forming in his 1,000-yard stare. It seemed to me that he'd given up on life. I was about to tell him to get out, but as soon as I opened my mouth, I noticed that he had a shotgun on his lap. I nervously asked him what he wanted, but he didn't answer me. Instead, he just sat still and stared straight ahead as if I wasn't even in the room with him. This man looked like he hadn't eaten in a month. As a kid, I was instructed to give the homeless food instead of money, since they might buy booze or drugs with it, so I decided to warm up some leftovers in the microwave. As I did so, I prodded the stranger with questions like if he wanted me to call someone. He did not answer for a long time, and hardly noticed the food I placed in front of him once it was ready. However, once he started talking, he told me a story that would change my life forever. He said his name was Cole Dyer and admitted to killing 20 people. I'm not at all embarrassed to say that I cried and begged for my life at this point. This only angered Cole, who ordered me to shut up and sit down so he could tell me something. Doing what he said, Cole told me that his first victim was a hooker who he choked to death. This one wasn't killed like the others, because he didn't know how he wanted to do it at the time, or for that matter, knew that he had a taste for it. After killing her, Cole expected someone to come by to arrest him. But after a while, with no detectives or police coming by, Cole figured he was in the clear. No longer feeling like some cog in the machine, Cole's murderous fantasies eventually took on a life of its own, and soon he started to consider himself the Pass-It-On Killer. The reason Cole liked that name could only be explained by his twisted sense of righteousness and questionable moral compass, which was explained to me in great detail. The gist of it was that if he killed enough pests, good things would come back to him. Symbolizing this, he would replace the head of his previous victim with the most current. Realizing killing people he knew was a sure way of getting caught, Cole learned what questions to ask complete strangers to discover the pests in their lives. Because who didn't like talking about themselves? Cole explained that he was great at talking to people and could talk the devil into lighting himself on fire, so learning where these people lived, worked, what they drove, and more was easy. More often than not, after finding the person, Cole would decide to let them live, because he called himself paranoid and meticulous, always guessing and second-guessing a perfect plan. Since the murders were spread out nationwide, and none of his victims had any connection to the others' authorities, were at a loss and never even questioned Cole about what he described to me as his hobby. It was at this point that Cole demanded that I grab a pen and paper and jot down his tale. Who was I to say no? Even though he had his hands on the table, there was still a shotgun in his lap. I didn't want to bet that it wasn't loaded, or that I was faster. The safe bet was just to write the story he was telling me. Cole only saw them from a distance, and at the time, couldn't see their features, though he described this group as being greasy and dirty, with long hair and beards. Even from that distance, Cole could see that their eyes burned like anthracite. One by one, they stopped their hushed whispering and turned their gazes towards Cole, whose heart skipped a beat at the sight. When he went back to his car, Cole dared a peek over his shoulder and saw them following him, just out of the cone of light the street lamps provided. It creeped me out. I was already thinking of finding someone else to kill because I don't like killing in apartment buildings. Too many neighbors, you know? When I saw them though, that sort of settled it. I wasn't going to go back there. Kept looking back in the mirror on the way home to see if I was being followed, but in the 5-hour drive, I didn't see a thing behind me. The next day, however, I noticed a car driving slowly through my parking lot every few hours. I was smoking lots of weed at the time and figured I was just being paranoid. But the next night, I woke up to tapping on the door. As Cole explained to me what happened next, he started to rock back and forth the way I've seen children do in an effort to calm himself down before continuing his story. Thought it was my imagination at first, but then I started hearing my name being whispered from the hallway. When I realized I wasn't imagining the noises, I looked out the peephole. Cole described at least 5 filthy and malnourished faces, partially covered by long, unkempt hair that did little to hide their dark, sunken, almond-shaped eyes that shined with a kind of hate and sin that even the Pass-It-On Killer feared. They spent the entire night begging me to come out. It was explained that in the building Cole called home, it wasn't uncommon to hear drunken exes pound on doors, demanding to be let in, so the begging went on for hours. Eventually, a neighbor Cole never bothered to get to know, but shared a thin wall with decided to open the door and ask the strangers to shut up or something. She stopped mid-sentence the moment she saw them, Cole explained. They pushed her back into her apartment and all piled in. They were tearing through her place for a while, and I could hear her cry, which caused them to laugh. If I didn't have number 19's head in the freezer, I would have called the fucking cops, man. Eventually, they made the woman call out to Cole, begging him to come out from his apartment. Cole could hear them telling her what to say. When she did, they would laugh and get her to say what they wanted louder. When Cole refused to open the door or respond, they grew bored and started getting violent with the woman. First, the sounds of punches and things getting broken, but then, Jesus, they were eating her. It was loud and lasted until the sun came up. I didn't want to aggravate an already delicate situation, so I remained silent and allowed Cole to go on for as long as he wanted. Cole sounded like a man who was completely and utterly defeated. It was obvious that even if these people were all figments of his imagination, he still believed it to be true, so much so that I couldn't help but to feel bad for him. Cole didn't leave his room until noon. By then, he was confident they were gone and that it was safe to leave. There was no way I was going to stay there. No fucking way. Cole barely touched the meatloaf. I heated up for him because he was too distraught. Considering how he looked, I thought he was going to inhale it. After packing his car and making sure to remember the head of his previous victim, who he kept on ice, Cole went to some army surplus store to get what he needed to get away for a while. To Cole, this meant staying at a seedy hotel whose main customers included hookers, drug addicts, and other types of undesirables. About a week later, I was getting some grub at some grocery store. Just walking in the parking lot and minding my own business, right? That's when I saw them again. Drove up right behind me and laid on the horn. I didn't even bother getting something to eat. I just wanted to get out of there. By the time Cole remembered that he left the head of his previous victim back in the freezer at the hotel, he had already crossed 2 state lines. I could tell this bothered him. At this point of the story, Cole had to take a moment, and knowing that he had a shotgun on his lap, I gave it to him. He finished the food I gave him, so I poured him some milk and gave him the rest of the baby carrots I had in the fridge, in hopes that my kindness would be repaid, and I could keep my head. Cole traded his car for a van shortly after that encounter, because there was no doubt that whoever was following him knew what he was driving. At least I could sleep in the van, right? Saves money on hotels and shit. It only took 5 weeks or so after trading in for the van that Cole crossed his pursuers' paths again. This time, he was in deep sleep when he heard them say his name, causing his eyes to shoot open, immediately locking on the dark eyes of a woman with the same sinister resemblance as the men Cole had seen outside his apartment. But without a beard, this woman's disfiguration was more noticeable. When she smiled, it was like she didn't have nearly enough teeth. The few that she had were small and brown, and grew everywhere, Cole explained as his dirty fingers fidgeted with the gun in his lap, like the gums and the inside of the cheeks. Even in the dark, Cole could see their black eyes glow with hateful light. And when he turned over the engine, the headlights revealed dozens of her family, standing 10 or so feet apart. Some were naked, Cole explained, his eyes growing distant. It was obvious to me that he was reliving that painful memory. They were standing still, smiling and just looking at me, like they were giving me permission to leave. Cole told me that he swerved to hit a few with his front tire or to at least clip them with the van's fat ass. However, they all stepped to the side, effortlessly avoiding getting run down. When I got the opportunity to ask what he meant by her family, he revealed that was a recent term given to them. At the time, he thought they were demons or vampires, but no longer thinks that's the case for reasons he did not share. After that encounter, Cole abandoned the van and stole a car. It was confessed to me that this was done whenever he felt that they were closing in on him, usually with a sensation of a tightening of his chest or his balls, triggered by anything from something he imagined seeing in the corner of his eye to the cries coming from a murder of crows. Zigzagging across the country, Cole made every effort to forever rid himself of these people and the hateful pulse that resonated from them. Cole would stay inside at night, and if he could, he would sleep during the day. He would pass the time by listening to music. It was a surprise to me that he preferred classical, considering how he looked. My shock must have been apparent, because Cole explained that Vivaldi Concerto No. 5 was his favorite, and thanked his mother for getting him into tasteful music. While on the run, Cole would take odd jobs here and there to pay for what he needed to survive. A tractor assembly line in Michigan, a toll booth operator in Florida, and a semi-weigh station in Nevada. Whatever job paid him in cash, and as long as he didn't have to work at night. No matter where he found work, he would not stay long before feeling that they were closing in on him and would more often than not leave before getting his paycheck. I will spare you the details of what Cole felt he had to do in order to survive up to this point. Up to now, he had been talking to me, a captive audience due to the shotgun on his lap, for well over 4 hours. The night Cole came to my house was shortly after leaving a place he had stayed at for about 3 months, a loft above a bar in northern Canada. When asked why he would want to live above a bar while on the run, Cole shrugged and said that he thought that a bar full of people at night would keep him safe. When they finally arrived, they softly cried out his name from the back alley under his window. With all the music being played downstairs, Cole had no idea how long they had been calling, but the moment knew it was them. The giggling began. They flattered Cole by saying they were his biggest fans and tried to prove it to him by telling him details that only the pass-it-on killer would know. Cutting ahead is hard. Even if you have power tools, it's messy shit, man. Took a while before I got the hang of it, though Cole confessed, oblivious to my disgust. I rigged a bike pump to a catheter, snaked it through the axillary nerve until it reached the superior vena cava. It only took about 2 minutes before the blood stopped flowing, and by then removing the head was pretty much blood-free. Cole swore to me that up to this point he never spoke to them. But that night, he finally had enough and accused them of being vampires due to the fact that they needed permission to come in. As soon as I said that, everything went silent. I must have been used to the sounds they were making because I didn't notice it until it stopped. That's when someone with a strange accent told me that they were not vampires, but in fact something else. Something that Cole never finished this thought. In the silence that followed, I didn't know what he was going to do. And this terrified me, as if suddenly remembering that he was telling me a story. Cole stopped staring at the wall and told me about how they then cut the power, not only to the apartment, but the bar under him. It didn't take long before I heard the woman who was tending bar that night, warning them not to come closer, and them just laughing. They tore her apart, and all I could do was wait until morning. To come, Cole confessed with a shake of his head, as if to eject the thoughts from his mind. Thing is, Canada has some long nights during the winter, and I only had enough food for a few days. Cole didn't tell me how long he stayed in that room for, and I didn't want to ask. It was obvious from the 1,000-yard stare that these events were still fresh in his mind, so I kept my mouth shut. When Cole left his room, he saw gore sprinkled everywhere, like a trail of breadcrumbs that started from behind the bar and led right to my apartment. Careful not to touch anything with his bare hands, Cole told me that he emptied the cash register and stole a toolbox from the back office so he could switch license plates whenever he felt the need to, in the future, to throw his pursuers off his scent. I don't know how to stop them, but I think I have a good idea how to slow them down, Cole said. But before he could elaborate, he noticed that the sun was shining through the window, and we had been talking for hours. Thankful that he went another night without seeing them and having someone he could talk to, Cole thanked me for listening. I didn't know what to say to such a story. I didn't have anything to compare it to, so I rambled on about whatever came to mind, eventually telling him about my boss and how he is always looking over my shoulder and wouldn't leave me alone, as if this was at all similar to Cole's own story. I didn't think anything of Cole asking me if I liked my job, or where I worked at the time, and soon I was answering all of his questions. After a short while, Cole thanked me. At the time, I assumed that it was because I took the time to listen to him. Then he took my car keys off the counter and left without another word. It might have been 10 minutes after Cole left before I called the police, and all I said to them was that my house was broken into and that my car was stolen. After all, if I said anything else, it might make me look as crazy as Cole. Maybe it was just me being tired, but I was truly afraid that the police would think I was insane if I told them the story Cole told me. The more distance I put between myself and that night, the less real it felt. But then reality set in once I learned that my boss was found dead a few days later. According to the local newspaper, the Whisper Alley Echo, pieces of my boss were found all over his bedroom. Most people in town considered this to be a rumor to stir up newspaper sales, and I wanted to agree. But it was hard to considering Cole's tale. In the back of my head, the idea of what Cole told me being true kept teasing me. It bothered me so much that I ended up hiring a private investigator. A decision I came to regret, because it didn't take long before getting a phone call informing me that my boss's head was found in the middle of another bloody mess, all the way in Cleveland. Over the next few weeks, I kept thinking of the story Cole told me. If those thoughts weren't front and center, they were creeping in the back, ready to pounce on a happy moment to turn it sour. It didn't take long before I started seeing dark patches dart from one shadow to the next, disappearing as soon as I turned to look at it. At first, I chalked this up to being a mouse or lack of sleep, since I found it hard to sleep in a house that was broken into. Hoping it was the latter because I hate mice, I bought some medicine in town to help with sleep. It worked wonders when it came to sleep, but did nothing to stop me from seeing these shadows with an embarrassing frequency. I would imagine seeing Cole's night visitors on the side of the road when I come across reflecting eyes, or think of them whenever I hear the house settle. It was as though toying with the idea of them being real was enough to invite them into my life. I don't recall what came first. Hearing my name being called out in public, or the soft scrapping at my screen windows at night. I will say, however, once I realized that I was hearing these noises, there was no way to block it out. At night, I could hear soft whispers that were hard to make out, and the more I tried to ignore it, the more it took center stage in my mind. It didn't take long before I felt the need to know what was being said. I could not tell you how many nights I stayed up, just so I could put my ear up to the wall. But I can tell you it was worth the effort, because unlike Cole, I know what they want. The first night I opened the door for them was terrifying, like losing one's virginity. Even with Cole's descriptions, there was no way I could have been prepared for their appearance, because they resembled humans the same way a shark looks like a minnow. During these conversations, they instructed me to share Cole's story with the world, so some of his madness could rub off on others and season the meat. If you see these shadows or hear these sounds after reading this, it's only a matter of time before they come to visit. And when they do, you can thank me, a better and more successful, pass-it-on killer than Cole ever was.